how to build a cult. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying you should build a cult, and I'm not saying cults are a good thing. Another way of saying this, I think, is how to build affinity or strong affinity with a select group of people. And this is a topic that I've actually thought a great deal about. And I think that I have some things that would be valuable. Okay, so big picture. Fundamentally, I think the goal of all media long term for personal brand should be transparency. And so where people get into trouble is that they will manufacture versions of themselves that are not true. Now, to be clear, I think there's a difference between manufacturing and emphasizing, right? Like you can emphasize certain things versus pretending, right? On a long enough time horizon, truth always comes out. And so if you want to do this game for the long term, which hopefully you do, then I would make truth kind of the North Star. And so that is our number one rule for our marketing stuff: state the facts, tell the truth. Sub point number 2. If we take that to be like rule number 1, then a lot of it comes down to 1, changing who you are, and then 2, how you communicate it. And I'm going to talk a lot more about the how you communicate it, but I'll just hit briefly on the changing who you are. And so number 1, or sub point 2A, the big thing here is we either have to do something that other people haven't done. All right. And so the way that you do this is that you either achieve something, you have an outcome that other people don't have, an output, or you do inputs that few people have done. And so I'll give you 2 examples. So like, okay, I sold my company for $1 gazillion. Okay, that's something that it's an output of some sort of work, and people will trust the output. Okay, then he therefore has some credibility around these domains. The alternative, you're like, okay, well, that's great for you or somebody who has these great outcomes, but if you're starting out, what do you do? Well, 1, outputs, there's levels to outputs, right? Like selling a business for, tens of millions or $100 million, like that stuff is very, very, very aspirational. But there are other business outcomes that are still super aspirational as well. Like doing, $10 million in sales is aspirational for some levels of business, or 100, whatever. Like you can basically level your way down. Okay. Now, on the input side, the same thing reigns. Meaning, like if you're starting out, like if you go and watch 100, Alex Hormozi videos and try and say like, I watched 100 Alex Hormozi videos and it took me, 40 hours, and from these 40 hours, I took these 10 timeless principles from it, and you have like the stories behind them, I would probably bet that that'll probably do decent as content. Right? So that's work that you're doing that somebody else doesn't have to do. And so if we zoom out on like what education, because vast majority of you are in the educational world in terms of what type of brand or content you're putting out, the point of education is to save people time. So think about just all the way zoomed out, humanity, right? We educate one another so that somebody else doesn't literally have to reinvent the wheel. Someone invents the wheel, and then we say, hey, you don't have to figure it out. We just take these stones and we just cut the corners off and it actually rolls. And people are like, whoa, that's dope. And this was like, man, I wonder if we could make this wheel better. And then that guy invents fucking rubber tires. All right, a little bit of jump there between, rocks being invented, but like you follow me, right? And so fundamentally at the core of what you're making, the thought, in my opinion, should be, how am I going to save this person time, right? I'm either going to save them time because I will give them strong proof that the things that I'm going to say will work because of my outcome, or I will give them the inferences from the work that they don't want to do that I have done so that they don't have to do that work, right? So those are basically like how I see kind of the 2 sides of education, right? And so you're like, wait, what does this have to do with being a cult, whatever? I'll get there. So that's 2. I think we're on 2B. Let's say 2B. That's where we're at. All right. So now let's go to 2C. Now, there was an excellent old copy thing on how to keep customers forever, and Dan Kennedy talked about. It's basically just a transcription of a talk. It's not really even like it's barely a PDF. I'll just put it that way. But let me see if I can find this thing for you guys, because I think it's actually pretty cool. Hold on. Where's this thing? Here we go. Okay. So what I want you to do right now is, and this, I actually did this, and I've done this 2 times in my career. is that I write down like 8 or 9 big headlines on blank pieces of paper. So if you have a whiteboard, this will work. You could do it on like an Excel sheet. I think it's better on Excel sheets because it's like there's a lot that you're gonna put on this. And what you're gonna do is category number one is evolution and origins. All right. And so what you want to do is you want to think about yourself as if you were like a Marvel character, right? Like, what is the evolution of origins, right? Now, if I were to ask you guys, what can you tell me? This is probably pretty self-aggrandizing, but I'm just going to ask anyways. So in the chat, does anyone know anything about my backstory? Can you just put any, just like little one-liner, a tidbits, 2 words, whatever, anything? Okay, gyms, Iranian, slept on the gym floor. Yep, dad's a doctor, Vanderbilt, helps people get fit, lost everything twice. Books, yep, lost everything twice. Powerlifting, bilingual. Whoever got that one, that is a fucking niche one, Jonathan. Like very few people know that one. Partner, yeah, partner lost money. Yeah, so believe it or not, actually those lines all together pretty much consolidate my origin story. And those lines put together exist on a document that I did one day where I was like, who am I? What is my story? Right. And so thinking about what are the bullets, if you had those bullets for you, right? And when you think about characters, if I say like, crashed here in a pod in a farm in the middle of nowhere as a baby, and 2 parents picked him up and found out that he was special, you would be like Superman, right? Like there's like bit by a spider, like as a nerd, Spider-Man. Like the origin stories are they anchor a character, right? And so as much as like I want to be clear here, you're not portraying yourself as someone you're not. You're just telling your story in a way that's clear, right? And what are the key points? And so category number 1 is like, what is the evolution of you? Like, and the thing is a lot of us, and by the way, this has been the biggest breakthrough. This is actually a pretty strong statement, but I believe it. Biggest breakthrough I had with content, storytelling, sales. This is it. In my attempt to try and make my stuff more interesting, rather than say, hey, here's 6 ways to do whatever, right? I think about what those 6 ways are. And then rather than just say the 6 ways, I really try and think like, when did I realize that was a good idea? Because every single one of us learned everything that we have from some experience or some other person, right? This is how it works. And so if an experience taught us this circumstances or some other person taught it, then there's a story and a narrative that's there. And it's 1, far more compelling, 2, far more interesting, and 3, real talk, far more effective from a teaching perspective, right? And so me telling you this right now, what some of you guys are going through in terms of like, what do I talk about with the branding? Like, I don't say, hey, here's my story. I weave that in when I'm telling other points. So, like, let me tell you, I figured out like how, to do reminder sequences. So, back in the day, I had my gyms, like I started going, failed once, then I started over again, failed another time, right? And then I can then get into the point of the story, right? But I'm providing some of that context, so it gets repeated a lot. Okay. So column 1 is your origins. Column 2, this is gonna be the biggest column, is gonna be dogma, your beliefs. What are your beliefs about the world? And I see these as like, a lot of these are just like, what created you? So you know where you started. And so then basically it's like, what are the occurrences, what are the experiences that you went through that shaped your worldview? And so I have this like monster list of all of these different lessons that I learned about business. And I'm telling you, what's crazy is that I come back and I'm looking at this thing and it's like, it's crazy. We live so much life that we forget. Like when I look at these one-line stories, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, that was a big deal to me back then. Like you forget. And so it's really worth taking the time to do this. Now, if some of you guys journal, which I think like 6 people on earth do, if that's you, that's amazing. But for everybody else who doesn't journal, this is a great like crash course on doing it. So column 2. Now, when I did the dogma one, I try and separate them into buckets about like what this lesson was about. So it'd be like, was this a philosophy thing? Was this a sales thing? Was this a marketing lesson? Was this a general strategy lesson? So I tried to bucket them for myself. And this was like very interesting. The next category is exceptional. All right. So what are the things that make you unlike other people? Like what are the standout things that you've done? Right. This is the accomplishment. Now, mind you, like some of you realize I don't have, dude, everyone has something. Like even you're like, well, I'm not that experienced in business. Fine. Talk about the fact that you did well in fucking calculus. I don't know. Like hopefully you've done something well in your life. It could be like you're the number one Diablo player in the world, like Elon is, right? Just casual. Uh, like you could be like, I'm really good at driving. Like it doesn't matter. Like everybody has stuff they're good at. Just list those out, right? So you list these pieces out. And the thing is, it can be small things. You know what I mean? Like, in the vast majority of like communities that I entered, I ended up becoming vice president or president in almost all of them. Like that's interesting. Like newspaper, literary magazine. I was vice president because you're not allowed in my high school to be president of two. I'd be like Zuckerberg. I would control the media. It was too much power for one student. So I had the literary magazine. I was president. I was vice president of the newspaper. When I went to college, I was vice president of the powerlifting team, president of my fraternity. Like that would be something that's like not business-y at all, but it's something that's like different or unique, right? Um, Spoke multiple languages. That's a thing that's not as common, right? I got above Harvard's GMAT score. That's like I'm just looking at my own list right now, right? like these are all things that are like kind of interesting. I won like person of the year for one of the online marketing masterminds that I was in. It was the first time they invented the award because I was such a good member, right? Stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like just little things. Like it doesn't matter. It's like kind of like your personal resume. All right. So that's your next list. It's like all the exceptional things. And it can be like I led my sales team for a quarter. Like it's okay. Like you get like anything you've got is fine. We're just dumping right now. Okay. Now, next one. Enemies. So if you're a character, you've got to have something that if you can't say what you're against, then you're not for anything. Right. So it's like, what are you against? Right. For me, it's like I'm against taking. Right. Like I try and give a lot. Like I'm against like fluffy shit. I tend to be against, not tend to be, very strongly against woke stuff, very strongly against victimhood, like in general, not taking responsibility for your life, quitting too soon, complaining. Like these are all things that I'm very aggressively against. So it can be a person or like type, like I would think about these as behavior sets as things that you are against. Like everything I described more is a behavior, right? Um, and so like that's like scarcity mindset. Like these are all things that's not a behavior, but like work-life balance, for example, like these are all things that my brand represents against. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I got to say like this is what I'm about, and people who fuck with that are cool with it. Sorry for those of you who have kids. I apologize. Maybe I'll bleep that out later. Okay, now so you list out the things that you're against. Okay, so think about where we're at. So you've got your origin stories. You got the experiences that created and shaped the beliefs that you are. You have the exceptional outcomes that you've had or accomplished along the way. You have your enemies, right? That the things that you hate, right? Things that you hate in this world. Now the next one is, and this is key, is your flaws, right? Because the reason that Spider-Man will always have like such a strong, like Superman without kryptonite would not be a character. Like they have to give him a weakness. He has to have a flaw, or he can't be a character that's interesting. Exactly, it'd be terrible, Elena. It'd be horrible. And so you want to write down like the flaws. What did some of you guys say? Lost his money twice, right? Like had a partner take everything, right? Like almost went bankrupt. Got in a DUI head-on collision. Got picked up out of jail from his girlfriend at the time, right? I used to drink a lot every single day just to like get through life. I tend to be very, like, depending on how you see it, like, I'm relatively disorganized. I'm very obsessive, extremely obsessive. Um, so these are things, right? That like these are some of my flaws, right? I think I have an ego. I think I can be arrogant at times. I think that's tough. I think I would probably add to this list now, which is that I at times can be short with people. And I am working on having less of a temper, but I still do. And so like this is me. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I am flawed. You know what I mean? Like I forget stuff. I'm forgetful. I'm really good at facts and numbers. Bad about like events. So like birthdays and like travel and like what's like I can't right now. I'm looking at I have no idea what's happening in the next hour. I don't know what I'm go after this. I have no idea what's happening. Someone's gonna come. They're gonna tell me what's happening. I have no idea. On the flip side, it allows me to be present. So I'm super present when I'm here, but I have no idea what's happening the rest of my life. And so so that's the next category is what are the things, and here's the thing, guys, this is the big one. Too many people who are starting out want to pretend to be this. They want to pretend to be Superman. And there's two main problems with that. Number one, it's not relatable. Number two, everyone knows it's bullshit. So if they believe you, it's not relatable. If they don't believe you, which is most people, you look like a fraud. You look like a make-believe. All right. There's no good outcome. Think about the guy who's just like, hey, I'm like pretty bad at reading. And so I can't write long books. And so I wrote this like very short one with lots of pictures because I'm not that good at it. But this is just the stuff that I found over the last like 5 years. I've taken, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, whatever the number is, like sales appointments. And so like I just put it into this little thing and this is what I gave to my team and I thought it might be valuable for you. You probably like that guy more than the guy who's like, I close 100% every fucking day. All of you guys suck. I'm amazing. And go right now and download it if you don't want to be a loser. Like, my God, of course everyone hates the second guy. And that guy's somehow surprised that everyone hates him. Right? And so you also, by the way, when you have your flaws, it actually makes you as a character, which is what you like. Everybody here is a person. Everyone here exists as a character in everyone else's mind. To you, you're a human. But don't kid yourself. No one really cares about you. You'll die, and a couple weeks later, everyone will forget. And so there's just like this pigment, that this little picture in people's head that has a couple bullets about you, right? And so if you want to become significantly more compelling, hedging what your good stuff is, preceding it with bad stuff will make the good stuff more compelling. So if I'm on a date and I'm like, listen, I'm really disorganized. I'm super forgetful. Like, I actually live in my mom's basement, right? But I'm the best chef you've ever had. You would probably believe me. Now, if I just said I'm the best chef you've ever had, an amazing driver, and I got great grades, like it just, there's no hedge. There's no reason for me to believe you, right? And so you can use these flaws, which you should be open and honest about, right? Because the thing is everyone else is going to say them, but if you say them, there's not a lot for people to say. It's like, Hormozi took testosterone. It's like, I've been open about that. I'm open about it, right? And so I'm saying this because like a lot of you guys are afraid. And so shame only exists in darkness. As soon as you put it in the light, it disappears because you realize no one cares. People care about lying. They don't care about the truth once it's out. So just put it out there. Like there's the common story of Eminem. Like he had the rap battle. He claimed all of his negatives, all of his flaws, and the other person couldn't say anything. You want to be you want to beat people to the punch. Beat yourself up more than anybody else can, as far as your marketing is concerned. All right. So that's number 6. We have our flaws. You guys digging this? It's kind of interesting. Okay. So the next one, I worked out my arms this morning. My arms are cramping up. Okay. The next one is associations. Now, this is a big one. This is a super big one. You have to be incredibly careful about who you associate with. And it's also what, who and what, right? Like if you come out and you're like, hey, I'm a Christian, that you're going to be associated with all things good and bad that people associate with Christianity. Now, if you are a believer, then you're going to associate almost all good with it, of course. But you'll have to assume also that there are people who've had negative experiences with Christianity or people who claim to be Christians. And so you're going to have that get pasted on you as well. And so when you make associations, it's like you just like jump into a pool, someone else's pool, and you come out soaked in all of those associations as well. And so you're going to be very, very particular about who you make associations with. And so like, and there's also degrees of association, right? Like if you go into business with someone, it's a much stronger association than if you go on a podcast, right? And you're getting interviewed by somebody, significantly lower. There's an association that's made for sure. It's more likely, though, that if you go on a podcast, you'll be associated with everyone else who that person has interviewed than you are with that person. This person interviews people who are like this, right? And so you have to think about this really, really consciously. And if you're not sure, in my opinion, don't associate. If you're like, I'm not sure if this is good, just don't. Because the one person that you can always associate with, you will always be on brand, is you. You can always associate with you. Okay. Next one is language, is having unique language, unique jargon, that like little isms that are your thing, right? Now, there's like, if you think about like CrossFit as an example of this, it's like they have the WODs and the Fran and they have all these terms, the Murph, right? They have their workouts, whatever it is. And so they have each of these kind of like little jargony things that once you get into the community, you start using them, and then you feel like you're in group, out group. And so basically, it's like you're giving your audience some of these words that they can use amongst themselves. Now, in my world, it'd probably be like business terms would be the language that I would say that I use. And I'm very particular about trying to speak about business in the lowest grade level possible. One is that it actually like a lot of international people can understand what I'm saying, and they can't understand what other people say. So that's a big part of it. The other part of it is just that, shoot, in America, 32% of eighth graders read at eighth grade level. So like just being reality is that a lot of people get. Now here's the thing, and some people are like, oh, those people are dumb. There's a lot of business owners. Like I got a buddy who's a super successful business owner, dropped out of high school when he's 15, can't read, just legit can't read, right? And I bring this up to say, like, there's a lot of smart people that just had bad education. And I think those are those are different things. Being well educated versus being intelligent are not the same. And so that's me just showing a little bit of my cards. But for you, when you think about your language, it's like, what are the isms? What are the like the unique things that you can name that are yours? Like client financed acquisition, something I've never heard anybody else say. It's something that I've said for a very long time, right? LTV to CAC ratios. I'm not the only person who says it. I would say that I probably talk about it more than anybody else online, but like, you know what I mean? Like that's something that I talk a lot about. And so that's kind of like, that's kind of the point there. It's like you'll have some unique isms that you'll use on a regular basis, like the value equation. Like that's a term that I made up that now people just use, right? Grand Slam offer, that's a thing I made up. That is a thing, is a term that people use. And so like, if you hear what I'm saying here, like there are words that things that you will name, frameworks that you will name, solutions that you will name. And if you have a solution, I would recommend you name it so that at least like one, you can call it something, but also more importantly, so that your audience can call it something. And then finally, you want to be likable. And so I think this is where it's like it's like letting people see the other side of you. Of course, the vast majority of your content is probably going to be around whatever it is that you help someone do, right? If you help people do food stuff, then it's probably going to be mostly about food. If you help people do dating stuff, it's going to be about dating stuff. If you help people do personal development, whatever, right? Like you're going to help them mostly about the thing. But it's like the little outtakes. It's like the little moments between points where I think you can shine through and people can kind of like see who you are. And I think that's why long form podcasts, long form content in general tend to build much deeper audiences than lots of short form content, because in short form, it's like you have such little time that those moments often just get cut, right? Because it's like, does it maximize watch time and all this stuff? Whereas a longer piece, you can let it breathe. And if someone's watching a 2 hour long video, if you take 2 seconds to answer a question, they're not going anywhere, right? And so I think that's fundamentally, I think that's one of the big advantages of long form content, is so that you can express these things. Okay. So these are the larger buckets under which you can, and this is a project. Like this whole thing, when I filled this out, took me, I want to say a weekend. It took me a whole weekend. But by the way, FYI, this whole list is like your content calendar for the next 2 years. So it's like, man, what do I make my content about? It's like, make it about the stories that shifted your behavior. Like fundamentally, you learned, you changed how you act. And so like, tell people why you have the conclusions you have. I think those are incredibly compelling. Here's the cool thing. People get the lesson without the scar. Hey, I got stuck in a car for 4 days, and this is what I did to pass the time, so that in case you're stuck in a car for 4 days, you can figure this out. I'll tell you one recently. I saw a short the other day from Huberman. I don't watch any of his stuff. I saw a short on how to get rid of hiccups. And I saw the short like a month ago. And I had hiccups like 2 nights ago. And I was like, you know what? I was like, oh, Huberman had that video. I was like, what did he say? And then I remember what he said. And then I did the thing. And my hiccups went away. And I was like, how about that? See? Short content did serve me, right? I was thrilled. All right. And so I bring this up just to say that you want like me literally telling you that story, right? That story, it's like it had changed my behavior. I learned something from it, right? And so we have so many things that change our behaviors throughout our lives that are valuable to other people. If you learn something, you just tell it. And people just don't write down, or they're not cognizant of when those changes occur. But those moments are so valuable to everyone else, like fundamentally how humanity has advanced.